We'll go ahead and get started. So, good morning and welcome back, everyone. I'm glad that you are here. I got a couple of messages from your colleagues that they couldn't join today. So, if those are people who are on your team, I hope that you'll take good notes and help them get caught up. I will. We are recording this, and I will upload it to the platform as I've done in the past. And so, if you have to miss any part of this, you'll be able to get caught up. A good chunk of today's agenda is going to be working either in our teams or in small groups. So if you have a team, you'll be working with them. If you don't have a team, then you'll be working with other people who might have similar kind of focus areas. We're going to spend the first hour just talking about root cause analysis, doing a little bit of practice with it. The goal then is for us to spend the second hour really diving into your work groups and practicing the root cause analysis. And then the last hour is going to be focused on next steps. So what do you do after you sort of prioritize some of these hypotheses of root causes that might be at play? And that means we're going to make a plan for going to test and validate those hypotheses. And so what I'm going to do right now is to kind of get our brains moving today. I'm just going to remind you sort of where we've come from and where we're headed. And then I'm going to put you into breakout rooms to help you sort of refresh your own brain of what you've done so far. And so you're going to get a chance to talk in just a second in small groups. So as a reminder, we started this program really focused on data, understanding our data, figuring out how do we get our data in a place that we can understand it? How do we look at it disaggregated by demographics for whatever special population that we're focused on? And most of you here are focused on non-traditional as a special population. But what we know is that the data, even though we can get it into like the most beautiful format and we can see trends over time, the data itself doesn't change anything, right? It doesn't improve equity and access. It just gives us that visibility, and it helps us start to ask some of the questions that you've been asking so far. And then from there, our job is to figure out how do we identify and address root causes? Because what we see, the data tells us the symptoms, right? It tells us the participation, performance, persistence. How are people, entering into and staying in these pathways? We often then, the sort of middle part of the tree is we identify some problems like, well, maybe they aren't aware of the programs or they aren't interested in the programs, but that doesn't help us solve the problem. What we want to then really focus on is how do we get to those root causes, understanding what's actually at play. And so last month, we focused on looking at all of the different barriers and root causes to access and success within CTE. You've learned the 4I model, so the interlocking sort of systems and how they interact with one another. And why I've focused our energy so far on this framework is it's so important if we want to see systemic measurable change within your environment. We have to address it at all 4 levels. So what so often happens is when we begin to think about and understand root causes, we can say, okay, well, the students, we can go into the center and say, well, the students are the problem, right? We need to fix the students. First of all, the students are a function of a system, right? The behavior that we see is a function of all of these external things. So even if we go and patch up and provide some kind of specific targeted training for students, unless we change those external things, we're going to keep seeing those same problems. And so when we look today, and in just a second, you're going to break out and to talk about, we've learned all of these different kinds of root causes that are mapped to the 4 I's, so ideological, interpersonal, institutional, and internalized. And so what I want you to think about in this sort of this warm-up exercise is, this is just to get your brains moving and remember, like, what have I been doing on this? I want you to talk about with who you're partnered with. What's your population focus? Why did you choose this? What did your data tell you about this group? And what root causes have you considered as possible root causes for what the data is telling you. So as a reminder, we have this cohort tracker. Let me drop the links in the chat for what you're going to need today. So the first link is the roster, and that's the spreadsheet that I have here. So some of you have already come in and completed this. So this first section, the population focus, was what you were to have completed after your data analysis. So for example, Leah and her team, they're focused on male students in health science and education. They're focused on concentrator. And so health science education, if I were to break this out, I would put health science education here. And so if you haven't done this, you have a chance to do it. If you're still not sure, then let's talk about it and we can figure it out. And then what we're going to be focused on today, you don't need to complete this yet. This is part of our exercise, but we're going to be completing these columns underneath the green heading today. Hypothesize root cause 1, 2, and 3, and then the data collection. So you don't have the answers to this yet, but we're going to get there. Just as a reminder too, you're also welcome to add in your attendance here as well. Okay. So let's see, I've got a note in the chat. All right, please put us in Zoom. Okay. Oh goodness, I have the wheel of death. Let's see if, oh no. Looks like Zoom is gonna freeze for me, so that's exciting. Oh no. Can y'all still hear me? Or am I frozen? Okay. I wonder what happens if I leave Zoom. It doesn't kick you all out, right? This has not happened before.
You just need to make somebody else a co-host, and then you can leave. The co-host will be able to let you back in and then make you host again.
If Zoom hadn't crashed, I could do that. So if when I drop out of this, if we all get kicked out, just come back, okay? Oh wait, now it stopped spinning. So I think we're good now. So let me, now that I can do something, I'm gonna set up breakout rooms. So for this first discussion, what you're gonna do is, you don't need to be with your team members here. This is just catching up on your own work. I'm gonna put you in small groups. Erica and Sarah, I'm gonna put you in the same room. Erica, move to.
Can I ask a question before you break us out?
Absolutely.
So I know you put the link in the chat, but I'm kind of working off two computers right now. How do we find all of these resources again? Because I have everything in all different places and I can't remember nothing.
Yeah, so the roster is on the learning management system. So if you go to the LMS, you'll see the cohort roster right here.
Got it. Thank you.
The third link is this. And then the digital chart paper, I haven't put it up here yet. I'll put it up there after today's, well, I could go ahead and add it up there while y'all are in the breakout room. So I'll put it on this week's content. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. All right, so I've got the breakout room set up. And sort of groups of 3 or 4. Let's see. All right. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes to get you warmed up and remind yourself what it is that has brought you here so far. I'm also going to allow you to change rooms if you need to, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. So if you weren't able to get through everybody sharing, I'm sorry. hopefully you were able to still make some notes and get your own neurons firing and remembering where you've come from and where we're going. You're gonna have more time to talk here in a second, but I want to make sure in the first hour we get through practicing the 5 why scenario. But before we move on, I want to give you all a chance to, if anybody wants to report out something that came up in your group that you want to share, any questions that came up so far. Okay. All right, well, let's dive in and talk about the 5 why. So one of the things that we've talked about before was the sort of notion of the 5 why. It's like talking to a preschooler and they keep asking why, and why. Well, it turns out this is one of the most effective ways to get to the bottom of things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to practice this in a second. So the first question is why. So if I look, for example, at we'll pick Eric's group. So Eric and Kayla said that Asian females in architecture and construction pathway aren't concentrating. So the question might be is, why do we think that Asian females aren't concentrating in the architecture and construction pathways? So that could be our question. And then we just come up with an answer. Well, we think that Asian females aren't concentrating in architecture pathways because of what's something that you've been thinking about, Eric and Kayla?
Yeah, we've been speaking to that they're being directed towards a 4-year path by both parents and counselors.
Okay, so because they're being directed to 4-year path by parents and counselors, so then we ask, well, why are the Asian females being directed towards 4-year paths by parents and counselors? Well, we think that the Asian females are being directed to 4-year because of, what do you think?
Partially because of cultural bias.
Okay, so we think that because of cultural bias, parents and counselors are directing female students to 4-year degrees. So why is the cultural bias informing why they advise them to this?
Just because of probably information media that suggests that is the norm and the path that Asian females should follow.
Okay, good. And so then why do we have a cultural norm that suggests or prioritizes 4-year degrees over something else?
It's a great question.
Right. So
that's where my ability to
that's okay. Hey, you did really great. Thank you for letting me put you on the hot on the spotlight there. So you kind of get the idea that we ask a question that's going to start with your focus area, and then you're going to get to an answer. And so you're going to do this in multiple ways. So for example, Eric had his initial answer, and then that created one path of a 5 why. You're going to do another one and come up with another answer and then kind of get to the root cause there. And so you're going to do this as an exercise here in a minute. But I've got a couple of examples that we can practice that are based on some different Perkins indicators. So this is a 5 why root cause analysis with a 5S1 example. So 5S1 is it's a quality indicator, 5S1 for special populations. So the question here for this example is, why are special populations attaining recognized post-secondary credentials disproportionate to all CTE students? And our first answer might be, well, they are not in CTE pathways that lead to credentials. So why are special populations not in CTE pathways that lead to credentials? Well, they're not interested in CTE pathways. So then we say again, well, why are they not interested in CTE pathways? The language used to market CTE pathways doesn't appeal to them. Well, why does the language used to market CTE pathways not appeal to special populations? We are using non-inclusive language and imagery that perpetuates stereotypes. Well, why are we doing that? And then there's a couple of examples here. We've not integrated students' voices, so that's connecting back to one of the root causes. We've not trained staff on how to reduce stereotypes. That connects to the both institutional of like teacher training and the ideologies, right? That's the stereotypes. And we've not incorporated recommended best practices for inclusive language and imagery. And that goes to marketing and messaging, which is one of the institutional elements. And so then once you sort of get to this point, now you have to go verify that. If we think this is what the root cause is telling us, now we go try to understand why, is the fact that we've not trained staff on how to reduce bias, reduce stereotypes, is that what's contributing back to our initial question? So this is our task today, is we're going to work through these 5 whys, and we're going to get to this point of where we've got something that we can go and test. We're going to go ask questions. We might do a survey. We might do some interviews. We might do some focus groups, but we want to go test that. So let's do another example. So this is a 5S2 example, which is the percentage of CTE concentrators graduating from high school having attained post-secondary credits and relevant CTE program or program of study earned through a dual or concurrent enrollment or another credit transfer agreement. That's what 5S2 means in Perkins lingo. So the question that we're going to start with is, why are special populations graduating high school with fewer dual or concurrent enrollment credits? And a response might be, there are disproportionate numbers of special populations who are CTE concentrators. Well, why are there disproportionate numbers, right? And so this is something that comes from our data, right? We can tell from our data to get that first answer. So then we ask ourselves, why are special populations not earning concentrator status in CTE pathways? A response to that might be, special populations may be less likely to be advised by counselors to consider CTE pathways. This is actually kind of connecting with what Eric was saying in his example. Well, why are special populations less likely to be advised by counselors to consider CTE pathways? Well, counselors may not believe that CTE pathways are ideal career options for special populations. And why is that? Well, because of deeply rooted cultural stereotypes about college and career. And why are there deeply rooted stereotypes about college and career? Well, because we've not provided training or put systems in place to reduce the impact of this ideology. And so again, we got to go verify that. So you want to do one more, or are you getting the picture here?
One more.
One more. Okay. So this is a 5S3 example. So this is 5S3 is the percentage of CTE concentrators graduating from high school having participated in work-based learning. So the question to start us off is, why are CTE concentrators from special populations graduating high school participating in work-based learning disproportionate to all CTE concentrators? So special populations are not getting selected for the few available work-based learning opportunities. And why is that? Why aren't special populations getting selected for work-based learning? Well, work-based learning partners say that they are selecting the best, I'm using quotes here, candidates. Why do work-based learning partners believe that the best candidates are not from special populations? A response to that might be, they describe selected students as having the right schedule, transportation, and fit with the team. Why might special populations not have the right schedule, transportation, and fit? Perceived fit may result from stereotyping, and schedule and transportation result from a need for extended services. So sometimes we have to have those extended services to meet those needs. And so now we can ask this, why might stereotyping and a need for services be an issue? Because we've not trained our work-based learning partners, and we've not surveyed students to determine their service needs. Are they in need of additional supplemental resources to help them meet these needs? And so again, we go from there and we begin to ask some questions and verify that. Let me check the chat here. So Chris says, as why is being asked, are there times when further research is needed before you can get to the next why? So, I mean, maybe, but really what we want with this root cause is we're trying to get to that sort of final thing that can then link to a root cause. If we stop at every point and go test that, we're never getting to the root cause. So for example, work-based learners say that they are selecting the best candidates. That's not a root cause, right? So we're trying to imagine, how do we get to that sort of bottom element, and then we can go test that. And so all of these things that we're sort of suggesting here, so let me go back to the previous slide. So like here, when like this middle one, counselors may not believe that CTE pathways are ideal career options. So we may not know if the counselors believe that, but the root cause of that is training, not having enough training, or systems that sort of address those ideologies. Then that links back up the tree to begin to address that. And so when you're doing these brainstorming exercises here shortly, I want you to not be inhibited by like, well, maybe I'm imagining this, maybe I'm kind of thinking something. That's okay, right? It's a brainstorming exercise where you're trying to get to the bottom of things. You're trying to get to a root cause that's going to link back to, let's see, where's the slide? Oh, that's not it. You're trying to get back to one of these, right? Now, when we do the exercise shortly, I want you to begin to think about, you might come up with about 3 different hypotheses. When you come up with 3, and you'll be able to select them here. So there's all of the 10 from the list, and they're colored by each of the 4 eyes. I want to challenge you to try to find one in at least 3 different ones, right? Because remember, for us to create meaningful change, we have to address it at all 4 levels. And so, so I want you to begin to think about, what are the root causes that you're identifying, and hopefully more than one level of the eye there, okay? So let me jump back to the slide. So let's do another one together. The examples I have here are for post-secondary. So let's do one that's for you all. Okay, so who wants us to give it a shot for your example here? Raise your hand, or just open up your mic if you want us to do a collective 5Y, kind of like Eric. And we can all help you. He did a great job of answering the questions, answering the 5Y. Anybody want to do this as a large group for theirs to get us started?
I'll do it.
Okay, great. All right. So Adam, let's see. So Adam is focused on females and black males or African American male students. Why can't I read? Focus on female and male Black, African American, and male students in education.
There should also be engineering. My apologies. Yeah.
Okay, so you're focused on females and Black males in engineering?
Correct.
Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to have to do multiple Ys. So you can't do a 5Y for the engineering and education, because those are totally different.
Right,
So
right,
you're
yep.
yeah, you're going to end up with multiple 5 whys there. So which do you want to do first, the engineering or the education one?
We'll do engineering.
Okay. So the question to start out is well, honestly, I think you should probably pick females or black males.
We'll do female.
Okay. So why do you think females aren't concentrating in engineering?
Um,
There's no wrong answer, just what's coming to mind.
just because it's typically viewed as a male-dominated profession.
Okay, so we think that females aren't concentrating in engineering because it's typically viewed as a male profession. All right, so why is engineering viewed as a typically male profession?
Because traditionally speaking, it's viewed as more masculine.
Okay. Yes, and I want us to spin this a little bit because you actually kind of get to a root cause initially, right? Like that's a root cause, that it's a stereotype and a bias, and that's okay, right? So it's possible that you don't have to go through all 5 whys, but I want us to spin it and say, why do our females think that engineering is for men at whatever your location is? So that's going to help us dig a little deeper. All right. So why do you think your females on your campus or in your region think that engineering is for men?
Being in an urban area, they're not as exposed to more hands-on work.
Okay. So why do you think that they aren't exposed to more hands-on work and learning?
Opportunities for those things compared to their counterparts in rural areas, possibly.
Okay. And so why do you think that? Okay, I'm trying to keep us in a direction here. It's okay. It's okay. So why do we think? All right. So let me go back to the beginning. So we think that females aren't participating in engineering because of stereotypes. That is a root cause, right? So it's certainly possible that you just get there, right? And then we want to keep digging deeper. And so you're saying that we think that the women within the urban area aren't having access to as many opportunities. That I think what you're trying to say is expose them to it, right?
This
Right.
one's mine. She
And so
took
they're
that.
not having enough activities that expose them to it. And so then that gives you an opportunity to sort of spin down another root cause and say, well, why aren't they exposed to these things? Are the boys exposed to it, but the girls aren't? Or is it just within those urban areas?
I think when I moved my thinking more to the district we're in now, in a more urban area, it would be across the board, not just female students, but males as well.
And so I think what's tripping me up is that's actually different than my perception. Usually urban areas, or at least, so is it an urban area that's poorly funded, so they don't have?
I guess where I was going with it more is compared to my experience in a rural district, they might grow up on a farm, or they might grow up on and be exposed to more of those kind of things. That was kind of where my thinking went, not
Okay,
necessarily that they don't have them, but just, again, comparatively from my experiences.
Okay, good. First of all, I like that you have an asset mindset of not what they don't have, but what they do have. That's very good. Okay, so we think that the females in the urban area aren't being exposed to hands-on kinds of things. So now that I'm past my roadblock, why do we think that the females in the urban area aren't being exposed to that? Because of fewer opportunities? is it about role models and mentors? Let's go back to the is it that they're not getting,
I
is it
think the
because they
role
don't see?
models and mentors.
Okay, so they're not seeing people who do these things, or it could also spin to say that there aren't policies and procedures, could actually be kind of classes, right? So not only policies and procedures, but like if there aren't classes offered, that is a root cause, right? Like
Yeah.
they can't choose it if it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Something like that. So that's getting you to a few. So you've pulled out stereotypes, potentially role models, and potentially policies and procedures, meaning like what exists, what doesn't exist, right? So you've got 3 potential root causes for that population. Well done, Adam. Okay, so who wants to, let's do one more before we go into our break. One more person want to give it a shot? Is this helpful for us to kind of work through this before you do it on your own? Okay. One more person. Well done, Adam. Thank you for volunteering. How about let's have a woman volunteer? We've had 2 men volunteer. Amanda, are you stepping up? No, she unmuted and then muted back.
I'll step up, and I'm with my colleague here, and she has a better way of articulating than I do. So,
Okay.
do you want to start? Okay.
Ooh, I'm fuzzy in the background. Okay, so we feel like we have the answers figured out, but what we're struggling is to come up with the why questions within that structure. If that makes sense. So
Okay.
like we identify, so our population was females with lower SES. And like our initial question is like, why are our lower SES females not participating in our CTE classes? So our main thing is it's a social aspect. So
Hold on one second. So I want to make sure that the roster is here. So you're focused on girls
yes,
from low SES. And what does WHS mean?
It's our high school.
Okay. Okay, so all right, thank you. So you're focused on girls from low SES, concentrating in all CTE pathways at one specific high school. All right. So starting with the first question is, why aren't girls from low socioeconomic groups concentrating in CTE? What's your first response?
it's a social aspect.
Like, tell me more.
You answered this one a little bit more. So like,
So when we had conversations with some of our female students, it's the pressure from their male peers to perform at their level, and also mansplaining their performance. So sometimes they would even be superior to their male peers, but they felt like they were still criticized. So it was a very like a social dynamic that kind of put them off of taking those types of classes.
Okay, so let's take a piece of that. So girls from low socioeconomic statuses aren't concentrating in CTE pathways because they feel put down by the boys in the classes. Something that's maybe,
Yeah.
Is that too reduced, or is that what you were saying?
I think we can go with that.
Okay, so now let's ask that question: is why are the boys putting the girls down?
Because I think they think they're superior. I mean,
well, and I would say that they think that they can get away with it. Like something has told them that that's okay behavior.
Okay, so the boys treat the girls poorly because they think they can get away with. there's two things there that you said, because they think that they are better than them. Is that what you're saying? And they
Yes.
think they can get away with it. So let's ask, why are they getting away with it?
Inconsistent teaching practices.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, that inconsistent teaching practices. So, in other words, instructors either not being present when those behaviors are happening or not responding to those behaviors, meaning intervening, redirecting, modeling appropriate behaviors, those types of things.
So everything you just described is culture and climate, right? So the teacher is not facilitating an environment that enables belongingness, that helps girls feel valued and affirmed. They are allowing the boys to get away with behaviors that are unacceptable. And so to me, you're really getting down to a culture and climate here. You're also talking about some ideological issues. Like, if the teacher implicitly or explicitly agrees that boys are superior to girls, like, that's deeply problematic, and that's an ideology, right? And so if they aren't interrupting those behaviors, if they aren't interrupting that, then there could be certainly at play lots of stereotypes and prejudice around the treatment between them. And then I also hear you, I mean, so that's certainly a bias also. That's what creates that interpersonal. So we kind of jumped ahead there, and so you have already selected here student voice. So tell me, if we go back to your 5 why that we're doing here, so we ended up with, why are the boys allowed to do this? And you're saying that the teachers more or less aren't addressing it. Well, why aren't the teachers addressing it?
So, like, the ideological stereotypes, or are we maybe thinking about that climate piece?
Well, then we started kind of comparing 2 of our CTE teachers, and how, like, female students have reported that they might feel more comfortable in one person's classroom over the other. So then that would deter them from, like, choosing classes taught by one teacher versus the other. But it's like, from, like, I don't know, how do we get teachers to be on the same page with a similar philosophy? I feel like that's kind of one of the things that our school's been working on all year. But I don't know. This is where I'm stuck.
That's okay. So this is a good example of what we're trying to do right now. Is we're trying to understand the root causes. I hear you are excited to jump to solutions, right? Like, how do we solve that problem? And we do want to solve the problem, but what we want to make sure that what we're doing in this process is that we're getting to the root causes that we're going to be able to address. So what I hear you saying in this one example is, like, you have some serious institutional accountability issues if teachers are allowing boys to treat girls like shit in a classroom, right? Like, if nobody's holding people accountable to that, that's a serious problem that is about accountability. It's about leadership. And some of that you may not be able to control or influence. And so what we want to figure out is, what are those root causes? And then what are the root causes that we can address, that we can intervene with?
One of my wonderments is, I understand the root cause analysis. However, how come we're not having these conversations with those NTOs to help identify, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like somewhat in an echo chamber. Oh, this might be why, this might be why, this might be why, rather. And I get what you're saying. Like, before we come up to figure out the solution, we need to understand the problem. But shouldn't those questions be generated with the NTOs rather than,
Do you mean with the students?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. So that's the next thing, right? So once you determine what your root causes, what you think your hypotheses are, then we're going to go create some kind of surveys, interviews, focus groups where we're going to go ask them. Because what often happens in one of the scenarios that I share from one of my colleagues and work that we did in Oregon is, and I think I've shared this story with you all before because I think it's a really great example of this, is a group going through this said, girls aren't participating in welding. Well, it's because the staff isn't trained. It's because girls don't have role models and mentors. And they went to test it. So they went to ask the girls, like, do you lack role models? And by the way, that's a terrible question because kids can't answer that question. That's a very complicated question to ask. When they actually interviewed them, they're like, no, we don't join welding because the uniforms are too big. And I had a friend that got burned. So they're like, wait, so we just need to buy smaller uniforms? Yes. So $350, they buy smaller uniforms. Then they do a little marketing campaign and say, hey, you're not going to get burned. Join welding. And then they increase their numbers from like 2 to 26. That's a tremendous leap. But they wouldn't have known that had they not gone and asked the girls. Because if we create these hypotheses that we think bias is the answer, and then we create this whole campaign against bias on campus, we're not actually sure that that's going to address the issue. So yes, to answer your question, that's the next step. The next step is like, how do we validate that these hypotheses that we're creating are true? And then whatever we find is going to drive the intervention that's going to solve that problem. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yes, it does. I just was thinking, even coming up with the questions with those students, but it sounds like it's just us initializing and kind of organizing our thoughts then to have those conversations is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So if you want to go and do some focus groups to kind of even come up with this, you can, right? Like if you're having trouble kind of getting to this, the reason why it's useful to kind of start to narrow your thinking around a certain focus area is it's going to help you prioritize what questions you're going to ask. Because it's really hard to ask people who have been traumatized by a system to be like, please tell me all the reasons why you don't do this thing, right? Like, we need to have some targeted kinds of questioning that we can ask that's going to help us get to understand what's actually happening. Okay. All right. So let's take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to set us up to start doing some of these exercises in small groups. All right. So 10 minutes. See you back.
Megan, I had a follow-up question.
Yes.
So when Sarah was talking about feeling like being in an echo chamber, and I don't want to speak for you, Sarah, so clarify, but I know that this is a case for some other CTE coordinators, and we have mostly coordinators on the call today, that they feel like they're the ones sitting, in a room and coming up with these hypotheses. And I wonder if it's recommended, that there be, a leadership team or a CLNA team or root cause analysis, just a group of people to have these discussions, or do you typically have just one or two people do this and then test it with other people?
Thanks for bringing up the question. Thanks also for highlighting a pretty heavy comment that Sarah said, sort of feeling like maybe being an echo chamber. Thank you for that. So the more people you can get involved, the better it's always going to be, right? What I encourage people to do in this process is to bring together as many stakeholders as possible. And I also like to include in that students, right? Students are our primary stakeholder as far as I'm concerned, and come together and do these kinds of exercises. And the reason why is because when people collectively co-create answers and solutions, it helps you to begin to address them in a way that doesn't feel punitive. It doesn't feel like, two people are trying to solve this equity problem.
Right.
The challenge to that, though, is that if you have people who've not been in a training that teaches them what some of the root causes are, it can be inhibiting for people to get to a root cause if you haven't learned what some of the root causes are. But it doesn't mean that you can't provide some instruction for them. And I do think that to create an analysis that's going to allow you to drive the results, we always want this to be as collective and communal as possible. And so, yes, right? Like if you can bring together a team that's going to help you do this, honestly, that's also going to make it more, you always want buy-in, right? The more buy-in that you have, the greater the possibilities for change. Does that kind of answer your question, Chris? I mean, it's sort of yes, and like, yes,
Yeah.
it can work.
Yeah, that was great.
And it can be challenging, right? Particularly with the sort of current conversations and sort of fears around any kind of inclusive activities, even though in much of what we're doing is like federally mandated that we do this. Sometimes when you're having these conversations, we have to kind of do the work without saying the words in order to get people at the table to help us have these conversations and to create those equitable and inclusive environments that allow everyone to succeed. So it is hard, and you can do it. So what's next is we are going to dive in. I think I have my little diver here because I miss scuba diving. I haven't been diving in a while, but we want to dive in to solutions so often. But and again, I shared this with you before, but as we begin to sort of understand these root causes and create some solutions, we want to dive into answers without diving into solutions. Because if we want to create systemic change that's going to address the numbers and the outcomes that you want, we can't just keep throwing spaghetti at a wall and to see what sticks. We want to be really targeted with our interventions. And so before we get to those interventions, what we're doing here is taking time to really test those hypotheses and to test and see what's actually happening. And so that means that, again, one more imagery, like one of these images is going to stick in your head, and that's okay. Like, I just want you to think like, but we got to hold our horses, no solutions yet. For this, we really want to make sure that we're getting those answers before we dive into interventions. I want to introduce you to one more process improvement methodology and how this is going to help us think about the next section of work that we're going to be doing. And so, as I've talked about before, systems are designed to get the results they get. So if we wish to change those outcomes for our students, if we wish to improve equity and access for special populations, we have to change the system. So an improvement methodology that's crafted for addressing root causes is Six Sigma, which is a set of techniques and tools for process improvement. And so this particular framework is called Six Sigma, the DMAIC model. And it was introduced by an American engineer, Bill Smith, while he was working for Motorola in 1986. And so this term Six Sigma originates from the statistical modeling of manufacturing processes. And so this methodology has 5 parts using the acronym DMAIC, and I'm going to relate it to what it is that we're trying to do. So the first thing is we have to define what's important. These are the quality indicators. So at this point of process improvement, we define our purpose, such as increase the percentage of CTE concentrators graduating from high school, having attained a recognized post-secondary credential by X% by X year. So you can refine your goal as you move through the process, but hopefully you've already set a goal moving into this. The next is to measure. This is asking the question, how are we doing? This is where we really dig into that disaggregated data that you've done in the beginning to identify those equity gaps. You want to look at the program level over time, disaggregated by special population, and then cross with race and gender. analyze, this is where we're hanging out right now. What is wrong? Or what is right? Their model says what is wrong. So this is where we do this root cause analysis. And this root cause analysis, this is that structured process, and we're going to be using the 5 why model that assists us in identifying those underlying factors or the causes of an adverse event, or in this case, the reduced participation, performance, completion of whatever your population is in whatever pathway. So understanding the contributing factors or the causes of a system failure can help us to develop actions that sustain that correction. And so then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to improve. Once we've verified the root causes, then we can design a targeted and strategic intervention to address the barriers and those issues. And then the final part of this process is control. How do we guarantee performance? And this is really about measuring results, reflecting, and making a plan to repeat the process for continuous improvement. And so the heart of this process, the heart of it, is identifying root causes and barriers for access and success in CTE, and taking them broad corrective action to address those needs to your specific state, region, or local area. And so where we are today is you've defined and measured. We're really focused on this analyze part. And so you've created and you're writing this in your and the roster. So you've got a population, you've got a focus, you've got a program level, and a root cause. So ultimately, you're going to come up with 3 hypotheses. For example, Hispanic women, that's your population. They don't participate, complete, concentrate in engineering because of class climate. So that is an example hypothesis. And then what we're going to set up in the last hour is, how do we go measure that? If we think that this is the reason, how are we going to ask the right questions? How are we going to get the right data that's going to tell us that this is, in fact, the root cause that's causing the outcome of Hispanic women not participating in this pathway? Does this make sense so far? And so one more imagery to kind of help you think about this. So first is we're going to identify those root causes. This is what we're doing next. We're going to start with the effects, the symptoms, and the problems, and then do an analysis to get to the root cause. Then the next thing that you're going to do before you move on from this hour is you're going to prioritize those root causes. Which do you think are the most prevalent causes for your population? You're going to add those to the spreadsheet. And then we're going to prepare, and the last part is, how do we test this? Like, how do we validate our hypothesis as true or not? If you then go test the hypothesis and you figure out, wow, this is not what's happening, that's a win, right? That means that we've not then created some kind of intervention that's designed to address an issue that's not actually the primary cause. So just tools that you'll be able to use, we'll talk about this later, but you're going to have lots of different ways of data collection: focus groups, interviews, single surveys. Most people use surveys. Observations are also really popular for this. And then we'll begin to plan our methods. But before we do that, we're going to go into a breakout. And so this is what you're going to, the table is going to look like that you're going to use. And so let's see. You're going to open up this file. So you should have the digital chart paper. So you're going to open that file. It should be in the chat. Let me grab that link again. So it's link number 2 in the quick links. So you're going to open up the digital chart paper. And in the digital chart paper, I have the things that we've gone over so far. So you've got the process improvement methodology, you've got the root causes and barriers to access and success in CTE, you've got the example 5 whys, the 3 examples that we did earlier, so you can kind of see how they work. I also have listed here the special populations if you need reminders of what those are. And so when you go into your groups, you're going to, I've already made one for each of the different breakout group numbers. is you're going to practice a 5 why analysis, and then there's another column to discuss a root cause, and then notes to discuss the DMAC process. If you prefer, I've created this as a template. If you want to use this as the 5 why to kind of help you work through that, you can copy one of those. You can make whatever slides that you want. This is really just for you to kind of take notes and work through this process. Now, for the breakouts here, I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and you're going to find a room to meet with your colleagues, because you're going to do this with your specific group. So let's see. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes.
Keep seeing her update your settings, and it's not mine.
Okay, so I'm going to recreate the rooms. I'm going to make 10 rooms, and you're going to choose one. So for example, Dawn, you're going to say, my team's going to room 1. And then so whoever's on your team or whoever wants to work with Dawn can go to room 1. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. You're going to pick the room, drop in the chat, or just unmute and say, hey, my team's going to go to whatever room. And then so we've got about 20 minutes of work time. As you work through this, I'll check in on you. Pop back into the main room if you've got some questions, okay? Great. Welcome back, everyone. So you're not done working your small groups. I just wanted to give us an opportunity to check in, see if there's any questions that you have, and then we'll be able to progress forward. So let's just check in. How's it going? What questions do you have? How can I help?
If somebody else has a question, please step up, because I don't want to be talking all day. But I had an observation when we were going through our root cause analysis. We realized it came back to the adults and like training our staff and being a little bit more aware of certain policies and procedures that we have, right? It's concerning to me that it goes back to adults rather than students. I would prefer that my hypothesis went back to student needs rather than our adults needing support. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so think back to the root causes and barriers, right? So our students are a function of the system, right? They're a function of their environment. So everything that we're doing is focused on them, right? But what they are experiencing is a result of all of the external influences. And so we can create interventions that are targeted to address student-specific needs like self-efficacy, self-determination, mindset. But unless we address all of those external things, like the teachers, like the environment, we're not going to be able to have any influence ultimately on the student's success. And so to me, what I hear you saying is like, I'm recognizing that it's not the kid's fault, right? It's not the student's fault. It's a challenge of the system and the environment that they're in. What we can do is still create some questions that we can ask students to validate the hypotheses that you're creating around culture and climate, around, these kinds of things, to see if that's what they're experiencing, right? Because we can still ask them those kinds of questions to validate it. But what I hear you saying is exactly what I want. I want us to focus on changing the systems and not the students. What else? That was a great question.
I think one of the things that I'm seeing, like when I start doing the 5 why analysis, looking at why are boys not concentrating in health sciences, and I can start it with courses might not be recommended to boys, but then it kind of spider webs. Should it be more linear, or should we be if those 5 whys kind of go in different directions, do you like set that up as multiple root causes or?
Yeah. So a lot of times, you might get to the second, third why, and then you've got 6 answers. So now you're going to have essentially 6 different charts that kind of spin out because you can get to different root causes. How I did it with these, so like this one right here, I have 3 different root causes that kind of answer this one question. So I wouldn't necessarily create 3 different copies of this because I got those root causes there at the very end. But again, like this is for your benefit. I'm not grading your 5 whys. They don't need to look perfect and linear. But yeah, another tool, I used to teach what's called a fishbone analysis tool for this. But I have found over years of doing that, particularly in a virtual setting, it's too hard. Because what happens with a fishbone is essentially a fishbone analysis is just a series of 5 whys. But by making us do 1 5 why at a time, then we can patch it all together and create actually a fishbone analysis. So that might be what you're talking about. Let me see if I can pull together a slide of a fishbone analysis really quick. I don't have one in this deck. Root causes and barriers. I'll pull it out during the break, and so I can show what the fishbone analysis is at the break. Okay, so Chris says that's something that the DPI trains on. Yeah, and it used to be how I taught this, but I kept finding that there were some bottlenecks in getting to what I needed. And so by teaching 5 why, it's just scaffolding a fishbone is all it is. So Leah, to kind of put an end cap on your question, it's not linear. It's not always linear. We want you to identify as many root causes, and then we're going to prioritize which root causes you think are at play and which are the ones that you think that you can go and test and validate. What other questions do you have? Okay. So what we can do now is I can open the rooms back up if y'all want to go back into your rooms and continue working on this. But I think actually what I want to do is to go ahead and give us another 10-minute break to give you a little release of the cognitive load. So we'll take our 10-minute break now. We'll come back and then we'll do a kind of reset on what we want to accomplish in the last hour. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. So 10-minute break. Try to deload your brain for a second so we can get to some problem solving for the last hour. So I put this slide into our notes so that you could see how this works together. And you can use this as, you can use this to edit as well. So essentially, I think that for our purposes, we can use this as a kind of 5 why scenario. The difference between what we've done and already and what this might be is a fishbone. You could start with an effect or a problem, right? So the video said start with people, start with sort of methods, procedures. So you might start with this of like counseling, right, as a box. Ask why that might be a challenge. You might start with scheduling, ask why this might be a problem. And then this can kind of help get you down to some root causes. So this is another tool that you can use. Remember the model that I introduced to you in the beginning. I haven't published this broadly yet, so I don't have enough written on it, but I like this as an acronym for our purposes a little bit better than the DMAIC model. It's the same kind of effort. But really where we started a couple of months ago was with our data. We're really trying to map and identify those root causes. And then the next part is we will design an intervention. So here we're really still focused on this root causes. And then ultimately, once we design an intervention that's designed to address the root causes that we identify, we will verify, did the intervention address the root cause, and then evaluate that whole process. And so this is where we've come from, and again, where we're going. Now, in the digital chart paper, I've added a section here in the end, and this is where we're going to spend the last chunk of our time. So once you have decided what are the hypotheses that you think are at play, and so you can write those. So again, pick a slide and then make it your slide. Add your names to the top there. So for example, if I go to the spreadsheet and see that Erica says that they're focused on girls from low SES don't concentrate in TE pathways because of culture and climate. You would write that here. We think that girls from low SES don't concentrate in TE pathways in WHS because of culture and climate. We think that girls don't participate and this is your second hypothesis right here, okay? So then how you're going to break that down is, in order for us to validate this first hypothesis, who are the people that you need to engage to test the hypothesis? Who are the people that you need to engage? So if we want to understand if culture and climate is at play, who do we need to ask? We probably need to ask the students, right? We need to ask the students what's going on for them. We could observe the classroom. We could go in and see what is happening there. And we could certainly ask the teacher about their perception of the culture and climate. And then we see the type of data needed. So for students, if we're going to talk to them, you can choose from focus groups, interviews, surveys. If we're going to do observations, we may need to just ask for permission to sit in the class and say, you know, you need to tell the teacher why you're doing it, right? That your goal is to increase participation of women and that you want to do some observations. And then make a plan for what is it you need to do to work that plan. And so you might find that you don't have the time, the resources, the capability to address all three, to test all three. It's possible that you might have three really similar hypotheses and that you can study them in a singular survey or a singular set of focus groups or intervention. And so you want to combine those the best that you can, just to sort of manage your time and resources. So this is your sort of exit ticket today, is that I want to make sure that you have a plan for understanding what your hypotheses are and how are you going to go test and validate those? How are you going to go test and validate the hypotheses that you think are at play? And remember, it's okay to find that it's not true, right? That's a win. And so this is another form of data collection. We're not looking at the big data systems, but we're creating more data that's going to inform our interventions. So before we go back into work groups, what questions do you have as far as what I need you to accomplish today? One more thing. If you want to use your own form, if you don't want to use the spreadsheet, not the spreadsheet, this table on the Google Sheet, you can create another document. Just please put in the spreadsheet the link to it so I can access it, so I can kind of see and support you in that progress. I will also say that survey development is an art and a skill. So I would like to be involved in your survey creation. And so I don't want to create it for you, but I want to be involved in it. And once we get to the point, it's a little too much information today, but I will post on the learning management system some best practices for surveys. And so please let me be a resource and support you in your survey creation, because sometimes our surveys can do more harm than good if we're not really thoughtful with the questions and the framing of those. Melissa, you're stressing me out, rubbing your forehead. Are you okay? I can't hear you. Did anybody else hear her? Oh, why can't I hear? Okay, well, I'm having hearing problems, I guess.
I can't hear.
Oh, you couldn't hear either.
I heard her. She's she said she had a headache for 3 days.
Oh no. But I wonder why, Valerie, you could hear her and we couldn't. Are you in the same room? Is that how you heard? Okay. As someone who also suffers from terrible headaches, I'm really sorry, Melissa. Okay, so your task, should you choose to accept it, is to work on the digital chart paper. I'm going to open the groups back up, and then you're going to focus on this. Because my my backup person today had an emergency and couldn't join us, so it's hard for me to join in your breakout room. So if you have questions, come back into the main room, and then I'll be able to help you, and then anybody else, okay?
I have a couple questions.
Yes, how can I help?
So one thing, and I'm looking again at male students concentrating in health science career pathways. One of the things that we've been kind of looking at was that the school marketing and messaging associate health sciences specifically with nursing careers. And I kind of struggle with that because I don't know if that's root cause or if there's more to that, if it has to do with now certain, like, females are being directed to nursing careers, which could get at more root causes versus offering more opportunities to address the broader field of health sciences. So, like, are these multiple root causes, or are they all just symptoms of the same root cause? Or
Well, I mean, to be honest, like, everything is a symptom of ideologies, right? So, like, if we want to boil everything down, it all comes down to ideologies. But we can't always act on just ideologies. So, like, marketing and messaging is a big reason, right? Like, if you're only marketing, nursing health science programs to women, like, then we need to understand why that's happening, right? So how you would test that is you could ask questions around, if you want to test, for example, certain messaging that you have on your campus, you can ask both boys and girls what resonates with them with the language, what doesn't, right? So that's one. Marketing is a little different than just like advising. It's similar, but like marketing is like, how are you actually putting out the content and who is it targeting? Are you only doing the health science advertisements to the volleyball team, right? Like, then that means that your marketing strategy is not inclusive. So what was the other one? So you said marketing and messaging.
so, like, I think about what could possibly be happening is, well, there's kind of couple things that I think could be happening. One, I think generally overall, there's a lot of directing students looking towards more affluent careers in health sciences into non-CTE courses, high-level science courses for your degree courses, that AP courses that will help them in that area. So I do know that happens, but I also don't know if that is part of an implicit bias that they're directing boys towards doctors and girls towards nursing or something like that, where you're seeing more of the girls in the CTE.
Yeah, so that's definitely a bias. How you would measure that or survey, or how you could try to test that hypothesis, is you could talk to the counselor's advisors and see, get them. The challenge is to approach it in a way that feels non-punitive. Approach it in a way that says, like, because everybody wants to believe that they treat people equally, right? We all want to believe that.
Right,
We just know it's not true. All of us, myself included. So you could think about asking them to just do a tally over a week. Like, how often do you encourage boys to do these things, girls to do these things? And say, again, you're not upset with them, you're just trying to understand the situation, right? Like, you're just trying to understand what's happening. Some people who are self-aware might just own up to it, and be like, yeah, you're right, I think I probably advise boys more for these things and girls for these. But you'll hopefully know the people well enough to know how they might respond to that. So that's one way to test that. Another thing is to certainly look at the data, right? So if you have more boys going into the path than the girls, you might bring that to the counselors or the advisors or whoever's and saying, like, look, I'm trying to understand how this is happening. And one way it could be happening is in the advising process. You could also survey students and say, did a counselor ever encourage you to consider nursing? You could ask them, right? And then make sure that you can disaggregate by at least gender.
Yeah, and that's kind of was along the lines of my next question too, and who the stakeholders are, just because I'm coming from a consortium. So like, I don't have a relationship with students or with, I mean, I have somewhat of a relationship with some of the faculty at different districts, but to go in and say, look for some of this more sensitive information that they might be wondering what I'm doing with it. I like the idea of looking more at the data. Because the other thing I was wondering is, like, if it comes to asking students, like, how do you know who you're asking? Like, if you're looking at concentrators, do you ask the
you ask everyone, and then you use your data systems to help you understand who those students are.
Okay.
So like, get their student IDs, and then you can cross-reference that to disaggregate, like, are these CTE students or are they not CTE students?
Okay.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm here to help you kind of craft those questions, but as long as you're able to kind of hone in on like what you think the root causes are, then we can start to kind of figure out how do we ask the right questions.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge is just that, is this the root cause, or is there more deeper into that?
Well, it's probably the answer is probably yes, but like, at some point, like, we have to test something, and hopefully we can learn from whatever way that we test. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Megan, would you be able to see if we're on the right track for we're on slide 43 for the hypothesis?
Okay, I'm there with you. Okay, so we think that females don't participate in ACE Academy because of college-bound messaging. Stakeholders, student services. College-bound messaging meaning like prioritizing four-year degrees?
Yes, because we have had several, even student service counselors, advisors, when it comes to scheduling, have said that college admissions has even directed what shows up on coursework for a child's transcript. So they're taking one college, saying that those courses aren't rigorous, and applying it to all colleges. Yes, the college-bound messaging coming from the adults advising students on course selection.
And tell me what ACE Academy is.
That's our Architectural Construction Engineering Academy.
Okay.
And it focuses on the trades aspect of construction. So we do have a separate project lead the way for engineering. It's not lumped in to the ACE Academy or combined.
Which further perpetuates the college bound versus the trades.
Yeah.
Okay. So stakeholders are student services, administration, parents, basically everybody. Okay.
I would say student service counselor. I should say I know what the cause is. Our policy and procedure of how we schedule students at the high school. The timeline is very tight. The students don't receive a course guide or course access of descriptions beyond a 2-3 sentence blurb about a course. And they're picking courses based on word of mouth and it's not based on, this is what you want to do. Here are the courses you need to take in the next 4 years.
So what you've just described is actually a different hypothesis.
Okay.
So we don't think that females participate in ACE Academy because of policy or procedure that doesn't give them enough time to make an informed decision.
Okay.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a different set of questions and a different problem solving thing that you can go to. I mean, for your first hypothesis, I would agree, like that's pretty much a kind of across the board negative stereotypes about trades. I do think that you can still test that and you can get some really specific kinds of responses that will help you kind of hone the messaging in a way that helps them see ACE Academy as valuable. Because what you don't need to prove is that people hold negative stereotypes of the trades. Like we know that exists. What you do want to find in your data is how do we find the messaging that's going to appeal to them?
Okay.
And so you don't have to delete that. I mean, that's like in parentheses, like that's the big thing that you're trying to solve. But what we want your effort to solve is like, how do we get the right messaging, right? Like what would be messaging that helps them understand the ACE Academy? So what I would encourage you to do for this one, I see that you started to write some responses. In my experience, open-ended responses with students don't generally work out well, and it's hard to analyze.
This would have a check all that apply.
Okay.
It would have 8 different prompts, and they have to select the ones that apply. Another thing that we've done is this year we partnered with a company, a local business, to do women in the trades, and they're coming to the school and there's a representative from each one of the trades, a female, and we had them set up meetings to feed the girls and have them just, whether they were in a course or it was open to the whole school for any girls that wanted to come to a women in the trades breakfast.
Yeah, so that's an intervention, right?
Okay.
And so another hypothesis could be is like, so you got this intervention, is that intervention getting you the results that you need? If
Okay.
it's not, then that's another hypothesis. Like if that's like the one big thing that you're doing, what we don't necessarily want to do is to like try to measure the efficacy of interventions that are at play, because that's not the goal. The goal is to figure out the root causes. And so
Okay. So we still somehow need to make a plan for our policy and procedure around how we schedule students.
So what I want you to figure out there is to test if that's true. So is the short time and the abbreviated, I think you said like there were like short discourse descriptions.
Yeah, yeah.
The question is like, is that a reason why students aren't choosing the ACE Academy?
Okay.
And so the questions that you might ask are, my brain is just not working well enough.
Is 1 week enough time? Is like they give a presentation to all students and then the next week they return and meet with them one-on-one? So a question might be to the students, do you feel like you had enough time with an advisor to make your course selections?
Yeah, I think that's heading in the right direction. I'm almost wondering, like, if you ask students, so when you administer the survey, you're going to send it to everyone, right? You can't just send it to certain students. You're going to send it to everyone. And so, like, I see the first question of, like, did you choose to participate in the ACE Academy? Yes or no?
Okay.
So if they say no, then you can ask why, select all the reasons why.
Okay.
And the reasons could be around negative messaging. I didn't know about it. I didn't have enough time to think about it. I didn't have an advisor that told me about it. And so that can help you kind of get to that. If they say yes, you can be like, great, yay, select the reasons why you selected it, you know?
Is that on when we did that training with NAPE, do they have surveys already for non-traditional occupation barriers or root causes?
So no, but I have a contract with NAPE right now to develop them. But I won't have them developed in the next week. But I do think that, you know, I think a simple survey for you would be of like, did you choose to participate in ACE? Yes or no? If they choose no, then pick all that apply, pick all the reasons. If they choose yes, then pick all the reasons. They would be different, right? Like, my parents supported me. I've planned on this since I was a kid. And then honestly, it could be a two question survey. Because you want it to be short and sweet. You want it to kind of tell you everything that you can about why they did or did not choose it. And you can say things like, you could put in there like, I want a 4-year degree, not a 2-year degree. And then you could actually branch off of that and say, why do you think a 4-year degree is for you and not a 2-year degree? That making sense?
Okay.
So draft that up and send it to me, or drop some time on my calendar and we can go over it. But I'd love to help you kind of fine tune that before you send it out.
And I'm going to put on my slide a link to a survey on NAPE that I just started looking at how they worded a non-traditional occupation survey, an NTO survey.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see that. Is it something new they posted?
I don't know. I just, it's called Survey of Students on NAEP. Yeah. What is a non-traditional student? And then they gave an example of an NTO survey.
Okay.
I'll put the link on the slide.
So there's one link. So let's see. This is really old. I would not.
Okay.
I would not advocate using this.
Okay.
Oh my God, kids aren't going to answer a 43 question survey.
I know. I was just looking at how some of the check boxes or wording.
Yeah, you could certainly find maybe some wording from that might be useful, but let me review it before you send it out, because like this is super old. Even like asking gender, and which is really they're asking sex, they're not asking gender in that first one. The research is really, really clear. Like you do not ask that question first. Like that's the last thing you ask.
Have the information from our point. We don't need to ask them the demographic.
Yeah, I would just say keep it simple. Shorter is better.
Yeah.
If you don't have to ask demographic data, that's best, and then you can add that in with like student IDs, later.
Do you think even is it appropriate to ask a student's family status, whether they're single parent, married? Is there data to show that impacts NTO data? That
I know of.
That's a root cause of single, you hear single parent homes or children of
I've never read literature that says that. I mean,
I haven't, but it's it's question 11, family status.
Again, that survey is really old, and I would not advocate it.
Okay. I'm gonna make a note of that. No.
Because it has lots of like stereotypes and biases. Even the notion of asking a 43 question thing, that's bonkers. Like,
okay.
Keep it simple, keep it short.
To test your hypothesis or to
test. So any survey should be short and simple. Simple for the user. It may be complicated as far as like branching and whatever, but especially when you're serving even adults, like shorter surveys the better, because there's tons of research on like survey fatigue, of like people get to a point in the survey and they're just like, oh my God, I just want to be done with this, and they just like click, so then you're not actually getting effective data. But as far as the correlation between single parent homes and CTE choice, I've never, just because I haven't read it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but like I've never heard anything about a correlation of that. But I can try to look it up. But I mean, I've done quite a bit of work on all the root causes, and without doing an entirely new literature review, I feel fairly certain I would be uncomfortable making that claim.
Okay.
Yeah. Good work.
Hey, Megan, it's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hi. Hey, that was really interesting that when you were talking with, I think it was Leah, about that tally because, yeah, first of all, it's really non-threatening. It's just like, hey, can you just kind of tally when you talk to kids? And being a former school counselor, that was actually a technique that I used in the classroom when a teacher was always complaining about a student and had them tally the few times that a student would be good. And actually what they noticed is the student was a lot good more often, and then their interactions with the student were more positive, which resulted in the kid not being a problem in the like it has this, and I could see that same thing playing out and using that even as a technique with a counselor that you might feel that there's some bias, um, creeping in there to
Well,
have them do an activity that will psychologically turn the tables or subconsciously turn the table.
the truth is like all of us are biased, right? Even
Hmm.
even I might be subjected, and I think about this stuff all the time, like accidentally, and if I'm not tallying it, then I didn't know. I might could create like a really simple, just like little worksheet that people could use. Let me, that's a Sharpie, not a white. Okay, so I'm gonna make a note of like a create a tally sheet for advising.
What I've learned, this is a separate topic too, but it has to do with the counseling in a way because of scheduling students. And, there's that thing that comes up, like we're talking about the ACE classes, ACE Academy. And, it's how is the district setting up its schedules? Are they letting students just pick any classes they want and then developing the schedule from that? Or is the schedule already outlined where advanced level courses are offered at the same time as ACE course? Like, it's like never the two shall
Chris, great point.
yeah.
Thank you for bringing that reminder up of prioritizing the courses offered and making sure we remove those barriers before the kids even, we build it the way you said at first.
Yeah.
Kids
So
pick
there's two philosophies with building a schedule, right? You have it open and the kids, and it's built around what the kids choose, or is there a framework that's kind of putting up roadblocks?
we have 100% student choice, and that dictates what we offer, what the teachers teach, how many preps they have. It's 100% kids picking their course.
So that means kids pick and then the schedule's made, or so they're not having to say I either take AP Science or I take ACE Academy.
They pick, and then we look at enrollment numbers. And if more than 15 kids picked a class, that course runs. And then we look at the teachers who have taught that course before, and then they start slotting how many sections based on the kids, how many kids picked it.
So what could happen is that you have just a couple kids who are crossing over, and then sometimes the class is like, okay, this kid wants this class and this class, but it's only two kids. So, we're going to make them choose.
Yeah.
Well, then what are they going to end up choosing? They're going to, if there's pressure or an expectation that they go with the 4-year college course,
They're going to pick
Yeah,
AP
and that
physics.
those couple kids make a difference, you know, in terms of. So, you know, so when those cases present itself, you know, where I would ask is there some workaround? Is there independent study, or, you know, how can we have these kids, how can we get creative for these couple kids who want to take both an ACE course and an advanced level course? I'm just brainstorming here, Tammy and Megan.
Because you got to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
people have to be, we have to rethink the credit structure and what courses the state has the minimum of the 15 credits, but I feel like CTE will never catch up until that you can address the amount of math and science that is happening in the trades. But until it's the policies that are dictated for graduation requirements, I feel like that's a barrier too. Is that another hypothesis, or?
From my perspective, it could be, because it's that perception that the rigor isn't the same.
Yeah, we value math and science taught by a math and science licensed teacher, but we don't value courses because they're not required to graduate, even high school. So therefore, why would we want our child to take a course? It's not as rigorous. I feel like that mindset is already the priority is already being placed on core academics and not CTE electives.
Yeah, I think that what you just said is very similar to your first hypothesis. So it's both college bound messaging, but it's still really rooted in that bias of like rigor versus not rigor. And, you know, rigor in and of itself, that word is deeply loaded and elitist, and who gets to decide what's rigorous and what's not. And so I do see a lot of similarities between what you just said and just the negative stereotypes of the trades.
Yeah, and the amount of reading and blueprints and problem solving and comprehension, but you need 4 years of it structured with a label English. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Good discussion. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think it looks like our numbers have dwindled.
I
So
emailed
is the
them
group
yesterday.
or the breakouts closed? Maybe they're still. I don't know what's up with my Zoom today, but it keeps getting hung up. So I wanted to give us a little bit of space to kind of debrief your progress, and to ask any questions on what it is that we expect. So for the next month before our final workshop, what I want you to do is to test your hypothesis. And then that's going to lead us to next time focusing on creating an intervention that is going to address whatever root causes that you find. So that doesn't leave us a lot of time to lollygag, as my mother would say. So we got a month to like figure out what are the things that now everybody's back. So we've got a month to figure out what it is that we are going to test and how we're going to test it and implement it. And so I want to reiterate, I really want to help and support you in your process. Tammy brought up, I think that was that Tammy or Jocelyn that was talking to me earlier?
It was me, Tammy.
Okay, great. And so Tammy brought up a survey that she had found on NAEP's website, and like, I would not recommend using it because I think it's really, really old, and I probably am going to tell them that they need to pull it down. And so just because something's on the internet doesn't mean it's great. So check with me before you do anything, because there's lots of research that's come out and help us better understand how to ask these questions. On a high level, I would say, you can follow the KISS method, but we're going to call it something different. Is like, keep it simple and short. That's your best strategy. Keep your surveys simple and short. And because we know that, like, the one she pulled up had 43 questions. Geez Louise, like, who's going to answer a 43 question survey? Like, keep it really simple. Think of the users, and then how are you going to get the data that's going to answer and tell you what your hypothesis wants. And I'm going to add these things to the engineering inclusion network. But another key thing is that if you don't have to ask demographics, don't, because only if you're able to correlate student IDs with their race and gender and any other special population. If you don't have the ability to do that, then you must always ask demographic questions last. Say it with me now. We ask demographic questions when? Last. Never ask them first. And that's because of a theory called stereotype threat, that when you ask a question around demographics first, it actually triggers the sort of belief that we might validate a stereotype about us and whatever thing that the survey is asking, and it changes our answers. And so always ask those questions last. Also, when you're creating any kind of surveys or interviews, like, none of this is a secret, right? Like, you want to tell people, like, our goal is to increase the participation of students in pathways, and that you're trying to create equitable and inclusive environments for everyone to succeed. Like, we're not trying to trick people into giving us answers. Like, we want to be really transparent about what it is that we're doing, because it also becomes a teachable moment where we can model why these things matter. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a standard claim, or where you said being open and honest about why you're doing the survey? Is there protocol NAEP has come up with, or the engineering inclusion, that you have a standard prompt that we should be?
That's a great idea. So I told Tammy, NAEP has actually hired me to create a survey bank. Well, it was my idea, and then convinced them to pay me for it. But I haven't done it yet. So, so if I do it in the next week, which is when it was due, several weeks ago, then I will share it with you. But I don't have it today. But that is a really good point of, like, to me, one of my core values is, and it is a reflection of, my work as a practitioner in this space, is like, we always want to be transparent. Like, there's nothing really served by, like, hiding and trying to be secretive about this. Now, there is also a strategy to sometimes taking unique approaches to things so that we get people to listen to us, right? Like, those things aren't mutually exclusive. So there's often strategy that's at play there. But again, I'm here to help you with that language. So what I would encourage you to do over the next week is to really kind of start drafting up your surveys or your interviews or your protocols or whatever it is. I encourage you to drop time on my calendar. How you do that is you can do it through the learning management system. There's a link. I'll give you the link here. So it's engineeringinclusion.com/meet. And then you can just find time on my calendar. And then it's usually helpful if you can send me your survey before we meet, so I can have a little bit of time to think about it ahead. But just drop some time on my calendar. And send me the file and then I can comment on it and then we can kind of talk through it. And that's, again, whether you're doing a survey or interview protocols or anything like that, just please let me be a resource for you. And again, I promise to prioritize that project for NAEP and then share it with you. What other questions do you have? All right, so what you can expect on the learning management system this week is I will post the recording of this as soon as it's processed and uploaded. It's uploaded to YouTube, and I'll post some resources on surveys that you can access. Also, let's see. I haven't posted it just yet, but I'm going to share because I'm still editing it. But there's also on here, okay, so you're going to look for survey development resources. It'll be under this week's section. There's a file here called Nontraditional Career Occupational Interest Survey. This was a survey that a client of mine created years ago, and it can serve as inspiration. It's not a be-all end-all solution, but it can serve as inspiration. This is the results of it. It's not the actual survey, and there are many different tabs. And so they did like a broad sweeping survey around sort of stereotypes and mentoring and all the root causes for lots of different CTE disciplines. So just kind of poke around in that and see if you can find something that's useful. You can also use, for those who have a more sort of STEM focused, meaning like technology or engineering kind of pathway that you're looking at. I mean, most of what you all have selected are what I call STEM. This website here, the AWE Online, has some really fantastic resources, and these are already validated survey instruments. Now, when you access these tools, it's going to ask you to create a login. It's only for them to track who's accessing them. So you can go here, and even though it says not secure, it's fine. It's just they haven't maintained the website, but the data that they've shared is really good. And so here's some on self-efficacy and different kinds of instruments that you can access. But they will never email you, so don't worry about having to sign up for that. And then NAEP also has some additional resources that you can access here that have just been curated over time. Just be wary that some of the things, like what Tammy shared earlier, like some of the things, the surveys are really old and not well aligned with the literature anymore. So just be careful of those kinds of things. So like some of these things are really old, but they can at least give you some ideas. All right. Any final questions before we end for today?
I think you said this, but where can we find that survey information on our LMS?
Yeah, so let's see. I hadn't made it.
Oh, okay.
That's why, because it was hidden. So now survey development's here, and then I'll tidy this up, but I'll go ahead and make these visible.
Thank you.
Cancel, come on. Okay, add it, make visible. Oh wait, it is visible. Okay. And then I'll organize these better later, but they'll still say those things. Okay. All right. Please reach out if you can. As Chris has reminded you, connect with me and let me be a resource to you. I am here for you. And I want to help you. So thanks so much. We'll see you on the platform. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.